All right, so now we're going to work on a technique called counter conditioning, because barking is a real big problem in this house because we have two little ones and getting them to sleep, sit, is a chore in itself. So we don't want Bryan waking them up because that's going to build some resentment between the humans and the dog. So counter conditioning is a concept where basically we introduce the dog to the stimulus, in this case, the FedEx guy, in a controlled situation where we provide a positive reinforcer so that he develops a positive association. Now, UPS, FedEx, and the mailman are very rude in the dog's mind because here's a person that comes to your place without permission, violates your territory, shoves something inside, and then leaves without saying anything. In the dog world, that's all kinds of rude. Mm-hmm. So what we would do, you mentioned that the FedEx guy typically comes the same time of day during nap time.
Typically, yeah.
Okay, and you kind of know when you're getting packages because if it's FedEx, you can track them. You know.
Well, they just come every day.
You know which? Oh, okay, so every day.
Pretty much every
day.
day.
So what you want to do is the two tests for doing this, or not tests, but ways that I know that the dog can handle it is: can I put the dog in a sit, and can I get him to take a treat? If the stimulus is too close to the dog, he won't sit down because to a dog, sitting down puts him at a disadvantage. And if I put the treat here and he's looking around the treat, then he's the stimulus is too intense for him to ignore. So what I'm going to do is ask him to come here so we can show. Now I have these Tricky Trainer liver flavored treats. I'm going to leave some of them with you, but for people at home, they're called Tricky Trainer liver flavored, and they're soft based meat treats. So let's say that I can see the FedEx guy coming. I would have him on a leash. Sit. So right now he's just licking. There we go. He's starting to chew. So I do this right at the same time that the FedEx guy is walking up. So instead of him racing to the door and saying, hey, you're violating our rules, our territory, he's distracted by getting this high-value treat while he hears the FedEx truck, while he hears the guy come up and ring the doorbell. We can do this also for ringing the doorbell. So what I would do for ringing the doorbell is have maybe you go outside and then say, so I would pull out a treat, let him start nibbling, and then I would say now. And ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, stop. So before the treat disappears, we stop the ringing of the doorbell. I would do this now, but I would
I don't think it'll wake him up.
Okay, why don't you go out and when I go like this, ring the doorbell.
Is he going to bark?
I don't know. No, well, maybe.
You can try it.
Okay, so every time I go like this, then ring the doorbell. And just leave it open if you could. No, just leave it open.
Ring the doorbell or not?
Ring the doorbell first. Okay. We can do it for the same principle for knocking, but right now we're going to do it. So every time I raise my hand, then ring it. Sit. Sit. Normally that would cause him to bark and rush the door, correct?
Yeah.
Because he's more interested in what I have here. So now we stop ringing the doorbell when the treat's about to disappear. Sit. Whoops. Let's try that again. You get my hand all slobbery. It's hard to hold on to these. Sit. So you can film him. He went to the door, but he didn't jump up on the door. He didn't do any barking whatsoever.
Well, that's because he saw Jeff.
Well, I understand that, but until he went over there, he didn't see Jeff.
Okay.
Because he had his back to the door. All right, so let's go back to me. So what I would do is, for the doorbell, especially when the kids are awake, practice this. So if he does bark, it doesn't interrupt anything. Mm-hmm. And what you do is, at first we're going to start out doing it here. And again, I would have him on a leash, so you prevent him from running around. And then I would move him a little bit closer and put him maybe 1 or 2 steps here. You can follow me with the camera. There we go. And put him in a sit. And initially, I would probably put his back to the door. Bryan, sit. Bryan, sit. Now you got that one out of my hand quicker than I wanted to give it to him. Let's come over here, buddy. Sit. Sit. So again...
So you're saying every time somebody comes to the door, have treats ready?
Well, what we want to do, you can come on in, is we want to practice this. The problem with dog behavior is it happens at times we're not prepared for it.
Right.
So what we want to do is we want to prepare him and associate the ringing of the doorbell means I get a tasty treat. Like I mentioned earlier with the restaurant, if every time you go to a restaurant you find a $100 bill, you're going to like that restaurant and go there a lot. For him, if every time the doorbell rings in a limited capacity for a couple of days, we do several of them in a row, and we're going to get him closer and closer to the door until eventually he can be right next to the door, taking the treat, listening to the doorbell, and doesn't react to the FedEx guy. Now you can do this for knocking at the door. You can do this for the garage door opening. You can anything that he reacts to. We want to have him on the leash. So if he, as you saw there, he's starting to jump around and get animated. Just like us, the more worked up we get, the harder it is for us to settle down. But counter conditioning is the best way because this will solve it in a permanent fashion. Then he will associate when the doorbell rings. I don't bark. I look around to who's going to give me the treat.
Right.
So if you get as many packages as you mentioned from the FedEx guy, you probably know the FedEx guy by name or have a good relationship with him.
I don't ever talk to him.
So I would maybe, some of the guys, I have some clients where they actually give their number to the FedEx guy and say, hey, can you do me a favor? When you're on your way, when you turn on my street, can you text me? And maybe bake him some cookies or something.
Yeah.
So but then if he helps you out with this, just the sound of the truck can be something you can counter condition him for, as well as the ringing of the doorbell and the knocking and the mail flap hitting and all these things. After a while, he doesn't react to any of them because he associates with a positive. Right now, he associates with a violation. That's why he's barking to alert you guys.
He also barks at anyone that walks down the street.
We can do the
all
same
the time.
thing. We can do the same thing. Now that would be something where we'd start out maybe here because you have a very limited window because you have a pillar here and a pillar there, so you can only see a limited capacity of the street. So maybe you just sit here. As soon as you can see somebody, you start counter conditioning him with the treat from this distance. When he consistently ignores that person, doesn't bark, then we take one step closer, put him in a sit, repeat the process. Do it on a Saturday afternoon when the kids are out running around and there's a lot of activity. So that way you can just, again, we practice it and set it up at a time where we have the time to practice it, establish the behavior we want, then the dog will continue the rest of his life acting that way. This is counter conditioning. It is something that you guys, especially because sleep is such an important thing for you guys and for your kids, will eliminate most of the problems that you want because now he doesn't react to those things anymore.